We are live. TikTok ban. Doesn't matter. Do we care? This is not the smartest guys in the room with my kick-ass co-host, Tom Langan from Talex Media. He's looking good today. You might not see him, but he's got his new glasses on, repping the hat like he always wears. I was talking to somebody the other day, Tom, and I said, oh, you know, Tom, you talked to him once, and they were like, wait a minute. And I was like, yeah, you know him. And they're like, oh, is that the guy with the hat? They knew, my friend. They knew.
It works. I actually had somebody at a networking event come up to me, or we were in a conversation with a group of people, and they said, somebody commented on my hat, right? Like, oh, I always know if Tom's here because I look around the room, and if I see the hat, then I know he's here, right? Like, it's always easy to tell if Tom's at an event, right? And so we were talking about it and why I wear it and how I started wearing it, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the people in the conversation said, well, maybe I should start wearing a hat. And I was like, you're welcome. Like, I was like, look, I'm not going to try to be territorial about like, no, I'm the hat guy or whatever. Go for it. But there's something you should know. And they were like, what? And I was like, you have to be prepared to wear it all the time. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, you can't show up without, if you have something that is like kind of signature to you, you can't all of a sudden just stop doing it, right? Like, consistency really matters. And it even matters when it comes to wearing a hat with your logo on it. If it's something you do most of the time, you have to kind of do it all the time. And I was like, so you're painting yourself into a corner. I've already done it and I'm okay with it. I'm happy with it. I wear the hat all the time, not all the time in my house, right? If I'm sitting on the couch with my wife and my daughter, like hanging out, I'm not wearing the hat necessarily, right? But like anytime I leave my house, anywhere I go, I always have the hat on. But I'm okay with that. I'm good with that, right? But you have to be good with that. And they were like, oh, I never thought about it like that. And I was like, yeah. I was like, so just a word of warning, right? Like, take it from me. If you're going to do it, you got to do it. Like, it's 100% or 0%. Like, there's really no in between, right? So yeah. So just a thought. If anybody thinks like, oh, I'll start wearing a hat, like, well, if you want it to work like that, if you want it to be the descriptor where people are like, oh, the guy that always has the hat on, like the guy that wears the flat bill hat, like, yeah, that guy. Well, then you have to do it all the time if you want it to work.
Okay, that's a good point because I'm looking at Dr. Tachi's picture over here and she's got a hat on and she looks fabulous in this hat, but I don't think her thing is that she always wants to be the one in the hat. Dr. Tachi, is that a fair observation?
Good morning. It's kind of fair. Hats are kind of my thing to the point that I wanted to develop a hat line.
Ah, that is a good idea.
Yeah. So hats are kind of my thing.
I love a product. We're going to talk TikTok today. We're going to talk about getting banned, but we like to get off track real quick. So I love a product that is on mission with what you do, but unique to what you do as well. So like I host this show, Bikes and Hikes, and me and my friend go off in the woods and things like that and like explore on and off the trails. I've looked at bug spray 1,000 times, like where I'm like, because we've thought, well, what product, like bug spray that was like off, or like, we just couldn't think of a name that would like, because me and him are kind of goofy. So we were kind of thinking of like some weird name for this bug spray or something like that. So, but a hat's on mission with what you do, but not that far, right on line. So I like the idea of a hat line. Anybody else think Dr. Tachi should start a hat line? In the comments, yes. That's where we're at with the hat line. Okay, so this is not the smartest guys in the room. Welcome. Because of each of you, me and Tom, as he would say, continue to not be the smartest guys. So thank you for being here. So we will start. I posted today, Tom, on TikTok. It could be one of my last posts on TikTok. I don't know that I care, or maybe I do care, because I thought it was pretty easy for me. The app is pretty easy to edit. Like, I thought it was better than Instagram edit-wise. That's why I liked it. I thought, I believe in Jack Welch, first to market. I talk about motivation in books. I don't think a lot of people are doing those two things there and sharing your stories. So it was all right for me. But on the other hand, if I am giving my secrets up to China, or maybe someday John's going to be president, and they'll be able to go back through his phone and be like, hey, there's that day John was looking at how many calories were in a Big Mac. Why was he doing that? So that's where I'll start you off, Tom. Go, and then let's hear what the people have to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you to some extent. I mean, you know how I feel about Jack Welch. So we'll just, we'll start there. I kind of think Jack Welch is actually largely responsible for a lot of the bad things in business and a lot of the bad things in our culture around business these days. But that's another episode. We could do a whole episode where all I do is give a thumbs down to Jack Welch, right? So there's that. But first to market, yes. Like, being sort of the first one to market can be important. It's not everything, but it can be important. I think what was really unique about TikTok was, and this is, you've heard this, talked about by tons of people with far more expertise in exactly how these platforms work than I have. The really unique thing about TikTok was the algorithm, right? And was that it would sort of randomly start feeding you stuff to kind of see. It in essence would just throw a lot of stuff at the wall and then see what kind of stuck, what you watched most, what you listened to most, and would sort of custom curate your feed for you, right? Based on your behavior on the app, right? And that was sort of a new thing, where it wasn't driven by advertising first. It was user first, and then fill in the advertising to follow, right? To generate revenue. So it was unique and it was accessible, like to your point, right? It was easy to use. It was accessible. It was easy to create content, post it there, share it there. It was short form. It was in a vertical orientation, right? Easy to use your phone to just film something, edit it in the app, right? They built in a bunch of functionality. So it was a really unique, interesting app. I think the place where we found ourselves, I should say, is not unique to TikTok, right? This is something that we see with Meta, for example, right now as well, is we've got these social media businesses, these companies, these platforms that are so big with so many users and an economy built around usership of the platform. They are sort of getting to the place where, and I'll use a phrase that has stirred a lot of controversy in the past. They're kind of too big to fail, right? We've let these platforms get so big and hold such sway, right, over our daily lives, including for a lot of people, how they earn an income, that if the platform fails, there are real economic consequences to TikTok being banned, right? And so, like, the platform itself, I don't really care if it lives or dies, right? I don't care if TikTok is here today and gone tomorrow. Personally, I don't earn my living on it, but there are a lot of people for whom there are real world economic consequences to banning TikTok. And so I think for that reason, we should really take a really hard look at. I think the ban was sort of rushed. I don't know all the ins and outs, but then again, neither does anyone outside of Congress really, about why they chose to pass this law. But I know that it was sort of rushed through, attached to another bill. So it wasn't really, never stood on its own. It was never voted for independent of a budget resolution, which it was included in. So, I feel like it was rushed into, and I think like it would be good overall to pump the brakes and look at ways to, at a minimum, if we have to ban TikTok, if it turns out that factually it actually is in our national security interest to ban TikTok, right? Okay, let's assume that that's true. Then let's pump the brakes and let's figure out how to do it in a way that lessens the economic impact and the negative impact on American citizens, right? If we're going to ban it in this country, then let's think about the people who depend on it and how we can help mitigate the repercussions of that action on them. So like that's my only real concern about banning TikTok, is that there are a lot of people, and it like estimates are in the millions of people who earn a significant amount of their income, not 100% or not all of their income, but a significant amount of income, enough that it would negatively impact them off of the platform. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't personally care one way or the other. If TikTok were to disappear right now, I'd be fine. My life would be pretty much exactly like it is right now. I'd still be just some knucklehead on the internet talking to my buddy Dom and a bunch of other brilliant people. I'm not the smartest guys in the room, right? My life would not change materially in any way. But for a lot of people, I think it would have some real impact. And for those people, I empathize. And I think we should pump the brakes, right? Like, I don't want to see a lot of people, suffer for a decision that was ill-conceived or not clearly thought out or not clearly explained. I think, if you're going to take away someone's income, they have a right to know why. So that's trying to approach it with empathy. But yeah, to be perfectly honest, I don't really care personally, but for other people, I definitely empathize, and I want to pump the brakes.
Okay, let's get into the juice. So there's so many angles to this and so many weird things about it. Like if you're mad that it's a Chinese company, well, then I hear that there's clothing companies and other companies that we're giving data to. Why aren't they banned? What makes this one unique? But maybe, like you're saying, maybe they are doing something weird. I don't know that to be the case. It is weird. It's weird that some of the other companies that would really benefit from the shutdown are probably doing the same thing. And we know they're doing the same thing. They are in and getting every piece of our data, listening into our phone, and they're two of the top richest people in America and sitting by the president at the next inauguration or whatever. They invited to front row. Meta and Elon are invited to the front row of the inauguration, running the same kind of business. But it's an American-based business, but it's more intrusive. We know that.
Don't forget about Tim Apple.
Yeah.
Or his real name, Tim Cook. If you're not Trump and you can actually remember that his last name is not Apple, it's Cook. And
that's not a political thing. It is just, it's interesting that these people get such access, but it is the same basic model. And so Dr. Tachi, we're talking all things TikTok here. Ban doesn't matter. I see you around. So what's your thoughts? And then let's get to Jason, Dave, Brian, John, Debbie, Brandon, anybody listening, put your thoughts on LinkedIn. Do you care? Do you not? On Twitch, wherever you're at today. We appreciate you hanging out with us, but go on, Dr. Tachi.
This is so multi-layered. I agree with Tom in the sense that this does affect a number of people who use this as their livelihood. So I feel it was rushed. It's very interesting how you can't get in basic legislation, but in 2 days you can get this type of rubbish through. Very interesting indeed. So I do feel it was rushed. I also am looking at a couple of things, or a few things. Number one, the parent company is ByteDance, and ByteDance also owns CapCut. So why is there a problem? I'm not even talking about the Sheins and the Temus, which could possibly also, as they say, pose a threat. Okay, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about another app that has the same parent company as TikTok. Why is that not on the chopping block? Why are you specifically looking at TikTok? So there's that, when there are other apps, because it's CapCut and one other that's owned by ByteDance that people use. Is it Lemonade? I can't remember. But
Lemonade, CapCut, and it's supposed to go away.
Yes, exactly. So thank you, John. So that to me is very strange, if not to say anything else. But I also look at this from another point of view. And I say this all the time. There should never be a time where your entire livelihood is tied up in somebody else's ability to cut the cord. It never should be. So the fact that all of your business is on TikTok for real, and what honestly, if we're looking at this in the world of business in general, offline, I don't know anybody who says, well, I'm going to put $2 million in cogs, and that's all we're selling, cogs. That's all we're doing. And you only have one way of doing things. They always tell you to diversify in business in general. So the fact that because this is somehow different, because it's some quote in quote, because this is social media, because this is the digital mediated world, now it's different. Now we can be in one, put all our eggs in one basket. And sorry to say, that's actually a very stupid and rubbish strategy. You should never do that. Number two, the fact that you have made your business on social media and now you have no other way to get at those customers. You haven't, some people probably have not created an email list. They don't have an app of their own. They don't have a website or anything that captures people's emails. So you have no way of getting to either customers and or followers / community members outside of that app. And I don't want to sound callous, but that's on you. At some point, I do feel for them, but at some point you have to say, guess what? I'm a social media person. I have decided to make YouTube or TikTok or, God forbid, Facebook, any of these things my main thing. Why am I using this as the only point of contact? It cannot be. You have to have a way to funnel these people elsewhere, because it's not about the platform, it's about the people. It's about you as an individual. There's a reason or something about you that these people connected with. You were the one that decided to make this the thing. Now, granted, I do understand that people are lazy, and to funnel them to someplace else is difficult. But the ones that care about you and not the platform will follow you into a volcano, and it won't be a problem. So I'm urging people that if this is your business strategy to use TikTok or whatever platform as a business, I hope you have a way to contact these people if this thing decides to go belly up, and that's anything. So my views are, to sum up again, that while I do feel for the individuals that will be affected by a TikTok ban, you also have to be responsible for your own business future. You are a brand, you are a business, even if you don't think you are. And so if it goes belly up and you lose all million something followers, that's on you, that you didn't find a way to keep them, because they're not trying to, it's not about you. You think they're not your friends. These platforms are not your friends. They need you in order to make advertising money, etc. But if they go belly up, they're not going to do anything to make it easier for you per se. So that's really on you, and that's where I'll rest.
I mean, I think that's you made all great points there, Dr. Tachi. I think, I don't know. I believe that there's I 100% agree that you should not rely on a platform that you do not own, especially count on it as your sole source of income. I mean, that's just crazy, right? It makes no sense. Talk about putting all your eggs in one basket. I mean, it is the definition of that saying, right? Especially when you're putting all your eggs in a basket that someone else is carrying, right? Like, that's the thing, is you're not even putting all your eggs in a basket that you own, that you have control of. Somebody else is carrying that basket, and they could turn around and just throw it into the woods. And like, what are you going to do? Nothing. You can't do anything about it, right? So there's no recourse. I think that's a point very well made. If I were to try to understand why people would do that, I think it's because there has been this sense that, again, these organizations, these companies, these platforms are sort of quote unquote too big to fail, right? And that even with poor leadership, they still seem to survive for a period of time, right? I mean, like, you look at what used to be Twitter, and of course, it has, as a platform, gotten worse since Elon bought it. It has turned into a bit of a cesspool, right? Since they lifted community standards and since they stopped enforcing them, right, and made it into a bastion of free speech, which is basically just license for people to just be awful to each other, right? You know, but it's still around. It's still kicking, right? So people that had put all their eggs in that basket are still afloat to some extent. And so, you know, and like time after time, Meta is just dodging bullets, you know, left, right, and center. It makes you wonder, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, right? But when you look at who stands to benefit the most from a TikTok ban, right? My number one answer is Meta, right? Probably in order, it's Meta and then Google would be my two suggestions, right? Google because they own YouTube, right? So what I wonder is when you look at the legislation itself, how the legislation came to Congress, who first proposed the idea of a TikTok ban, who wrote the legislation, right? Because there's a crazy loophole. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but there's a crazy loophole that actually a lot of legislation that gets passed is written by lobbyists for congressional offices who then bring it to the floor of Congress. So that's a thing. But anyway, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that lobbyists funded by probably primarily Meta and then maybe other lobbyists funded by Google sort of are the ones that pushed this through. And that's not a far-fetched conspiracy theory. I think that's kind of how business is done in Washington. But again, you know, you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. And I don't know. I'm a big believer in when you're wondering what the motivation is. A lot of times, the first thing you do is follow the money, right? And like in terms of financial gain, Meta stands to benefit the most, and I think Google stands to benefit second most. So just just some things there to think about. Jason, what do you think as you've sort of you've been posting on TikTok and working on your presence there? How are you feeling about the TikTok ban? What are your thoughts?
I have several things to think about it. This is really, I can't really add too much more. You pretty much just said everything, really laying it out in the long run. However, what I'm more interested in historically, I'm more interested in the censorship that business has on our government to be able to tell us when, where, and the modes of what is considered national security. So just remember, in the 40s and 50s, you had McCarthyism, and Joseph McCarthy made up a list of companies, people, organizations that were considered a security threat to the United States. So when you look at the bill and you follow the TikTok ban bill, was it S.1143? When it looks at the language, like you said, if you follow the trail, then look at what happened with McCarthy. Okay, Joseph McCarthy was a senator from Wisconsin about to lose his seat, so he had to cause controversy, and people paid attention. They said, well, what is the Red Scare? What is my identity? Is my identity safe? So these are the same things. It's out of the playbook of history if you really look at it. And yes, I'm not going to be jumping ship to Red Note, and I'm not going to be just jumping back and forth to Meta or Google. I'm going to choose what best benefits me in the platforms that are available to me. But I did check out Red Note, and I can tell you there is, if you really notice right when you get in, you notice that they're coordinating you to get to understand Chinese culture. They want you to understand their ways and how they conduct business and their modes so that you can do what you do on TikTok over there.
Hey, Jason, can I ask you something about this Red Note?
Sure.
Like, if it's owned by China, wouldn't everybody expect like the same results, that it'll just figure it out and move down the line 2 months later?
That's an interesting question, Dom, because I mean, if you really think about it, you go to one platform and shifting to another, does that really resolve the problem? No, it doesn't. They're going to do what this symbolizes. This ban is much bigger than many Americans who are losing their sellership, which I think they have a right to recover for damages. And, do these legislatures even read the bill? Most of the time they don't. If I went up to any senator, in the Senate and saying, what do you think about Bill 117 and ask them about clause 3, more than likely, they're not going to be able to answer. But if you tell them, oh, it's a TikTok ban, well, I feel like it's protecting our country. Oh, in what aspects, and what can you relate to us, and what the debriefing you've gotten in closed chambers about TikTok that you can say. Like, if you're worried about spyware, here's the bottom line. Your device is a spyware 100% of the time. It's made in China. They're made in Korea. They're made in Japan. Guess what? They're not made here. So if you want to cry wolf, then you also have to look at the device and the other softwares that make all this work. It's political chess in business is what I see. So I'll just wrap up. I mean, I don't want to go on forever. Tom covered it just fine, but I think that I checked out Red Note. I'm not going to be producing for there. Sorry, I'm just not. I'll wait, because even they said it themselves. We have so many requests. The translation, we have to work on a whole grid of translation now, because it's all in Chinese. Your profile's written Chinese. You may have a English name on top, but everything, your commands are all in Chinese. They even tell you the rules and how they operate constantly. So yeah, no, sorry. And TikTok is not going down like we think it's going down so easily. So watch the political shifting of chess and see where people are really at. That's what I can best tell you.
Good stuff, Jason. I like that political shifting. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Okay, TikTok ban, doesn't matter. This is not the smartest guys in the room. New segment, Tom's Thumbs. Does he like it, yes or no? So at the end of the day, he has to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So I'll frame the question, see if we can get a we'll go and see what Tom thinks about it. Tom, college sports. There's national championships about to happen. There's students that get scholarships, students that couldn't pay for school otherwise, other than playing athletics, things like that. Now there are NIL deals, name, image, likeliness. What does Tom think about NIL deals? Is it good? Is it bad? Does it get thumbs up or thumbs down? Go on.
I mean, I 100% think that players should, like the NCAA, the way it's functioned for years, right? And I'm not steeped in the minutia of when the NCAA was started, how it's evolved over time. But for the longest time, for recent history anyway, they have essentially owned and usurped the rights to the name, image, and likeness of college athletes, right? And while doing so, have also simultaneously prohibited those same athletes from generating an income based on their own name, their own image, their own likeness, and their own skill set and abilities, right? So essentially they said, hey, you're amazing at this. You are incredibly good. You're one of the best people in the country at this thing, this sport, right? This athletic endeavor. We're going to make money off of it and you can't, right? And the NCAA was making literally billions of dollars off of not only usurping the rights to the name, likeness, and image of these college athletes, but then also simultaneously prohibiting them from doing the same on their own, right? From having endorsement deals, from earning an income based on their athletic prowess, based on their skill set. And I think that's BS. And it was BS that lasted far too long. That was allowed to continue for far too long. And it was allowed to continue for a long time, essentially because the people running the NCAA were, again, making billions of dollars off of the backs of these college athletes, and were unable, or were able to essentially force regulation and regulators to allow them to continue doing so, right? Basically, they had a big checkbook. They had deep pockets, and they were able to fund lobbying and legislation that kept restriction tamped down so that they could continue to rake in money off of the back of other people's work. It was exploitative and I think unethical. And I'm 100% in favor of and endorse you get a thumbs up for NCAA athletes being able to earn an income off of their likeness, their image, and their name. I think it's about time they were able to, and I'm glad that it's happening.
All right, good stuff, Tom. I will say I played Division III basketball, and while I was there, I had a job at Fridays. I used my likeliness to be the best server at TGI Fridays, although I did fail training and have to go to extra serving, but extra server training. I cried behind the dumpster that day. I was so sad. But why couldn't somebody have another job where they're doing whatever they do? So, okay.
Well, let me jump in a quick second. If you
Okay, Swifty, then Dave. What do you got, Swifty? Go on.
Well, I agree that they should be able to benefit from their image and likeness. However, let's not forget that many of these athletes are getting a free $200,000 to $300,000 education. They're also getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in perks, from food to clothing. Some of them are getting vehicles. So these aren't poor kids just being taken advantage of. Now, maybe years ago they were, but in the last 20, 30 years, these athletes are getting...
Brian, can I this is a good, you got me here, so I got to ask you, by what standard are they not being taken advantage of? Like Zion Williamson, that was producing, like people were buying Nikes like crazy, and Coach K was making millions off of his, because the shoes were, he determines Coach K of Duke determines the shoe deal. Zion's the reason people are buying the Nikes. So Zion might get a $300,000 education, or whatever you want to call it. If it's that much, maybe it's more. But Coach K made the millions. So is he not being taken advantage of? Because market value says he's worth more. If the market will bear it, like if Brian goes out and gets paid $100,000 to speak, are you not getting taken advantage of if you don't get market value for what you're worth, for what your image is worth, for what your efforts are worth?
Well, you know what? If it wasn't for Coach K bringing them on the team and developing them, then he wouldn't be in the position he's in. And we seem to be shrugging off the fact that he's getting a $300,000 education at a premier school that is providing him the tools to go out and make millions of dollars when he is done with his contract to play for the school under those conditions.
It's fair. I always like to talk to Brian about this kind of thing. You know, my biggest issue with it all along was, if, like, okay, even if within the school realms, you say, I can do this, I can do that. Okay. But why can't I take and go, like now in Pittsburgh, every athlete is talking for the local dentist, or they're on, talking to whatever business. They're like, how could you limit what they're doing outside of the actual school? That seems so like shady to me.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go, Tom.
Well, I was just going to say too, I think the other thing to consider also is, besides the fact that it was definitely, I think, shady and a bit of a stretch that they were able to sort of get away with enforcing rules like that outside of the sport, away from the university. But to your point, Brian, I just wanted to address like the idea that, they're getting this education, right? So look at that as an investment, right? If you're investing a few $100,000, right, to $300,000, whatever, depending on the university, right? Investing a few $100,000 in this athlete, right? You offer them a free ride to go to this school, right? You provide them with the tools that they need to be able to keep their grades up and succeed in their studies at that school, right? Which includes tutors and stuff like that. So fine, you're investing maybe $200,000 or $300,000 in this student, but the return on that investment is massive, right? Those students that you're investing maybe for the entire team a few $1 million, right, in terms of tuition and room and board and tutors, et cetera, right? So say you're investing a few $1 million for that entire team, you're generating millions and millions and millions of dollars a year in revenue based on that. So I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I'd be willing to bet that those numbers are very favorable for the universities, right? And very favorable for the brands that sponsor those universities. And that the athletes are essentially being shortchanged, that they are not getting, because without the athletes, it all evaporates, right? It all goes away. They are crucial to the business, right? And I think they should be compensated as crucial workers, right, within the business, because without them, the business disappears. It doesn't exist. So,
Well, then, to your point, anybody who works for big pharmacy should be getting paid more, because big pharmacy, when they're making a EpiPen that honestly you can make for under $2 and selling it and wanting to sell it for 500 and making that kind of profit, and these executives, not just of big pharma, of places, are giving themselves 20-30 million dollar bonuses. Isn't it the same thing? They're benefiting from selling medication to us, and they're the ones and their workers are making it. And I'm sure the workers aren't being paid what they're being paid. It's just a hierarchy. You know, the people who own the company and the executives, they're going to make more money than the people actually doing the work. It's just it's a hierarchy.
well, and
is that any less wrong than what's happening in college?
I mean, look, I got two things to say, Brian. Do I think that generally speaking, workers are underpaid and executives are overpaid? Yes, I absolutely believe that. And then the other thing I would say is, look, man, two wrongs don't make a right, right? Just because one industry does it and I think it's wrong there doesn't mean another industry should be able to do it either, right? So that's all I'll say. But Dom, what do you think?
See, Tom's thumbs gets people worked up. This is good. Good stuff, Brian. Good stuff. Hey, Jason had something to say, and then I'm going to segue back to TikTok because Libby Dunn, that is on LSU.
Can you go to Dave real quick? I mean, we get pretty long-winded, but
yeah, okay, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Dave, Jason, that's an honorable thing. Dave just launching his podcast. He's coming here for years. He's been our friend. He started using video and stuff like that, developing his message. Now he's launching a podcast. So Dave, before these long-winded fools, I'm kidding, guys, before these long-winded guys, I'm including Tom in that, start talking again. What do you got, Dave?
Hey, I resemble that remark. Go ahead, Dave.
No, so like at least on the topic at hand of the kind of describing the college NCAA thing. So first off, as most of you guys know, I don't live in the States. So with the TikTok thing, that doesn't actually affect me too much because I live in Ireland. And then when you're talking about the NCAA kind of contracts and stuff like that, it reminds me of
Dave, one thing. So sorry to interrupt. So are you saying it's not getting banned in Ireland, or you don't have it in Ireland? Which one is it?
We have it in Ireland, but it's not getting banned. So
Okay.
that would fall under EU regulations.
Okay, one more thing. See, once you get me, is it a big deal at all in Ireland? Is it like a common app that everybody uses, or no?
Absolutely common app. So
Okay,
it's
gotcha.
like anywhere else in the world, probably one of the biggest apps, that and probably Snapchat for like young people kind of in the area. I know like my fiance has younger siblings that are in their teens and early 20s, and they primarily only use like Snapchat and TikTok, Instagram for their parents, and like Facebook is cringe. To quote Hannah, the youngest one. But what I find interesting, right, is when you're talking about the NCAA thing about these kind of contracts, like it almost kind of reminded me of like kind of music contracts of like pop stars who get like or a band that gets to sign up with a record label, but they don't end up owning their own music anymore. They don't end up owning anything. So I always thought it was just an interesting correlation. And does profit mean the biggest driver of these of a university? What is the primary purpose of a university, right? Because even though there's even though there's sports, right? Like, what's the most primary thing of what a university should be focused on? Education. Like in Ireland, they have what they call the GAA, which is the Gaelic Games. So all of the Gaelic games are all amateur. So no one is a professional player. They are carpenters, you're a plumber down the street, but they have a lot of pride in their hurling, in Irish football, in all their Irish sports, right? So it's going back to the sports of it. So are we talking about the business of college basketball and how much those contracts need to be negotiated out of, like, okay, as Brian was saying, like, yeah, they're getting this amount of education. My brother went to Duke. He went to MBA school at Duke. And to pay a lot of money to go to MBA school there, like, but the return on investment that he got out of like that opened up more connections. So like, I don't have a whole lot on what's right or wrong. But I think when it comes down to a lot of it is that you have to recognize sometimes when we think we're the consumer, we're actually the product, right? These athletes, they're not the consumer, they're the product. They're the product that the university uses to go to try to bring in more crowds, to bring in more money, fundraise, to what they can do. And same thing with kind of TikTok. We as users on all these platforms, including here on even Clubhouse, right? We're the user of it, but we're also the product, because our data is the valuable thing that then we can be advertised to and everything else. And so learning how to, I think it comes down to having a stronger data protection for our own personal data and having ownership on what is ours. And like Dr. Tashi said, it's the way the internet and everything's kind of come up. It's kind of come down to these major kind of companies like Meta. One of the things of my time of traveling around the world, anywhere I went, Facebook was still a thing and was still a pretty big thing in many, many countries of, and particularly not necessarily the regular feed, but the community groups that come along with it, right? It's what brings people together. I don't really have any kind of good points here, as I'm kind of feel like I'm rambling now.
No, you,
But I want
Dave,
to
you're
say
doing
thank you to
good.
Jason for being so kind there to let me hop on first.
Dave, one more thing. You got me down this rabbit hole, TikTok in Ireland. So, you use TikTok. You're on it all the time, right? Or you're posting videos and stuff on it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, if the American market quits using it, I would guess what percentage of your followers and stuff like that, or the people you engage with, are from the States. And then at that point, does it become like, oh, I was getting 500 views and now I'm getting 50? I just wonder about that. Is that a thought?
Yeah, and it's never really kind of like crossed my mind, because like my content doesn't really get a lot of views to begin with. So like whoever sees it, I'm just happy they see it. Like, if they're, I get people from the US, I get people from whoever sees it. So for me, it's just about kind of throwing the blowhorn out there, throwing out my idea and seeing who it resonates with. If that market kind of shrinks because the US isn't involved, that means I just now focus on the markets that I can do, right? I can't focus on the things I can't control. I can't control Congress. I can't control any of you guys. I can't control anyone watching my videos, but I can control how I act and how I respond to situations. It does
good
seem
stuff, man.
Yeah, that's all I get.
No, I'm good stuff. Appreciate you. And he is somebody doing it. He's been consistent with his content. So check out Dave. Go on. Not the smartest guys in the room. Jason, you were the gentleman. Let Dave speak because I was jumping out of order. So what do you got, Jason? Wrap us up on that subject.
TikTok and the sporting complex, the college sporting complex, both intersect because it's what Dave said. It's the product, it's the vehicle, it's the information, and it's the attention. The most valuable thing in the world is our attention. Where your attention goes, energy flows, right? That could be esoteric speaking. but I'm not no dummy. Like Tom's mentioned before, I don't put all my eggs in one basket. I'm the magician. You want to come see the circus? Guess what? I will move somewhere else. I will deliberate somewhere else. Just same with college football. Here are the important questions that people do not ask of universities. Why is it that an athlete should benefit off of his name and his likeness? It's getting to that point where attention is so valuable. So when we look at college sports, then why isn't the endowments put into the college universities of their disciplines of education to have them upgrade to be competitive in the world markets of information and transformation? So why aren't they spending? They build arenas like Roman arenas in ancient Rome, where people will flood a college campus and fill a stadium of 50,000 people on any given Sunday, or go into a basketball arena and have 10,000, 20,000 film and per ticket. If you ever paid for a floor seat on a court, in a prime college court like Duke, I'm sure you're going to spend more than $1,000, even mid-level. So what about the merchandise, the name? Why shouldn't you benefit from your likeness and even post university? Because let's face it, do they ever do the analysis of how many college athletes finish their college education? Say, if you went to Stanford, many of them don't graduate, don't finish with a degree, and don't benefit off of it. And many are poor after their professional career, if they even make the professional. So it's really monopolies of attention. You look at TikTok, you look at the NCAA, it's basically a monopoly game, and you're playing like, hey, I landed on Park Place and Boardwalk. I'm raking in the dough from rent. So rent your attention out, but deliberate. You keep your hard copies yourself. And you know what? You're not always interesting. Not everybody on TikTok is interesting. I limit the people I follow. I like watching people put things together. Matter of fact, I'm making comments in your guys' TikTok and I'm sharing it. You know, you don't get attention unless you promote it and you make it work. So just like, I don't care if you go to a Facebook or not. That doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Doesn't mean you're going to gain. But if you're gambling, that's your assumption of your own risk. It's all speculative. You look at both platforms, the NCAA sports, college sports. Why isn't education of benefiting as a human being more important than seeing Johnny Manziel screw up after any given Sunday, go to the Cleveland Browns, screw his NFL career, and they get a documentary made about, hey, this is what a frat boy does with some attention. So I mean,
There you
take
go,
your pick.
brother. All right, I'm rolling on here. I'm rolling on. All right, Jason, good stuff as always. We appreciate everybody for being here. All right, Dr. Tachi, we know your thoughts about media. We have not heard from you on NIL, and then we're doing show and tell. So, what do you got on NIL? Should you could sell hats to them all, Dr. Tachi, branded hats? Go on. What do you got?
I 100% agree with what everyone has said. I think that there's no way that you should be playing for free for a school. Never mind the fact that there's some sort of scholarship involved with it. And in fact, that was the excuse that many people used in terms of, oh, well, they are getting paid, they get a scholarship. Okay, that's not enough, not compared to the millions they're making. And I can think of another institution where the universities made a killing off of the backs of other people. It was called slavery. So this is just really like a neo slavery in a sense. And so the fact that they're just now getting to it, good, it's about time. But all the billions that have been made off of the backs of these people already. So now you're trying to pay, quote, reparations. And I'm like, this is not going to work. But I'm glad that they are finally looking at the fact that these young people should get paid if they're doing it, because the reality is you can't really work anyplace else. And you hear all these stories of athletes before that, they really didn't have any money. They're not necessarily coming from means, a lot of the people that are playing college athletics. So they didn't have any money, eating sometimes was problematic for them. And it was made to seem like they're living the life because they're college athletes. Well, no, not really, and not for most of them. And so there's so much of your time that is spent in athletics with teammates. It doesn't leave much time for anything else. So they couldn't work. It became really difficult for them. So I think this was a move that needed to be made. And there are lots of other moves that universities need to make as well, but this was a big one.
Good stuff, Dr. Tachi. Appreciate you. We knew we'd have good thoughts on it. Dave's high-fiving you. Tom, I'm trying to get my camera on, but show and tell might be on you today if I can't get this back on. So how come I touch one thing and my camera just goes off and I can't get it back on? Plugged in?
I think the bigger question is, why are you touching stuff?
Look at the you can't look. If I move my arms, when I talk or something like that, maybe I bump something.
Is that what happened? You bumped something? Yeah. For anybody listening right now, we lost Dom's camera feed. So
see, you leave a kid to his toys, and he's like, "What does this do, Dad?"
That's right, Jason. All right, keep talking, Tom. I'm going to try to figure this out. Do your thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think to Dr. Tachi's point, at the end of the day, like what we saw with the NCAA is monopolistic behavior, where they took advantage of their labor force, essentially, right? Which is what those athletes are to the NCAA, right? They're essentially their labor force. And you see an organization, a corporation, taking advantage of their labor, exploiting their labor, who often didn't have an out, right? You talk about when you look at it, they just don't have good alternatives, right? They don't have other good routes to take. And so you have somebody that doesn't have a better option anywhere else, right? Other than staying involved with the NCAA, right? And continuing to play on their team at their school. And you take advantage of that fact by exploiting their likeness, their name, and their image to generate millions and millions of dollars in income. So yeah, I mean, it's clearly, as Dr. Tachi said, it's almost it's kind of, I would almost liken it to indentured servitude, right? Because there is some, they are receiving some form of compensation in the form of like a scholarship and things like that. But again, like Dr. Tachi said, that doesn't necessarily put food on the table. Like there've been lots of stories of college athletes, surviving on ramen or the kindness of other people to put food on the table, right? Or to put a roof over their head, to have a place to live if they didn't have room and board covered as part of their tuition or part of their scholarship. So, yeah, I mean, it is in some ways, a little bit of a sort of microcosm of what we've seen in a lot of other places in terms of how businesses and organizations treat their customers or their clientele, right? Or the people that they depend on to earn their income. Dave, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I did, because it comes down to like I think in modern capitalism, right? We push so much for profit. And this is where I find when I notice the difference between US and Ireland is that there are private universities here, but they have strict regulations where they can't raise ridiculous rates on their tuition. So everything is affordable. So, if a private university or organization like the NCAA needs to continue to raise or continue to make the same amount of money every year or more, they're going to do whatever they can, right? Like my one issue, like I feel like if we don't have guardrails around capitalism in industries, they will go out their way to exploit people for the name of profit, and then people will get hurt because they aren't the primary purpose. They aren't the primary thing that's going on. Like, it's about the money. It's not about the people or their education.
Yeah, exactly, Dave. Unfettered capitalism is often turns into a very bad thing, and legality and morality are not always synonymous, right? Just because something is legal doesn't mean it is morally or ethically a good thing to do, right? And so that's how we end up in these situations where unregulated businesses take advantage systematically of people, right? So Dom is back. We have the video feed up, and now it's time for show and tell. What do you got, buddy?
I left and came back. I'm going to do it quick so we can have a good wrap up here. Since Dr. Tachi was talking about hats earlier, I am going to put my hat on. This in Pennsylvania, you could call it a skull cap. You could call it a beanie cap. In Pittsburgh, we call it a tassel cap. And this is what I'm wearing. I used to have a sweet tassel cap collection. I still have a good many. Steelers, Bronx, New York. But I used to have a yellow Wu-Tang one, a red Bronx one. I mean, I had a Boston Celtics one. I was the player in the tassel cap game, Dr. Tachi. So this right here is a sweet Motivation Champs tassel cap. That's what you get today.
All right, quick question. Do you know where that term comes from? Like, just, and I don't. I'm curious. Do you know why it's called a tassel cap?
I don't know. I don't know why it's called a tassel cap. And it's odd to me, like, because from the time I was 2 years old, they were tassel caps. So then, like, people are beanie, skull, all these other names, toboggan. Like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So I wonder if our resident hat expert, Dr. Tachi, has any thoughts on why they are called a tassel cap around here.
I was just about to put that Pittsburgh has some very interesting terminology. I've never even heard that term. That's what it is, tassel cap. And I don't care what anybody thinks. All right, Tom, that's my show and tell.
I like it. I actually do have I guess it's a tassel cap, but I have a hat that Becky made for me that has a Talex logo on it. It's not embroidered. It's actually a leather patch that we had made and was sewn onto it. So I do have a Talex Media tassel cap or beanie, right, or knit hat, whatever you want to call it. But I actually have one downstairs that I wear in the wintertime because for those who don't know, underneath the hat, there's not a lot of hair going on, and it gets cold in the winter if you don't have hair on your head. So I wear a knit cap in the winter quite a bit. But yeah, I never heard tassel cap either. But that leads us now with that delay. That gets us to the end of the hour here. We're at 10:29. We got a minute ish left for me to do a quick wrap up. And so I just want to kind of get back to what we were talking about when we first got on today, talking about the TikTok ban, right? The ramifications of it. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it matter? And I think when you kind of step back, right, and instead of sort of looking at it from ground level, jump up to like a 30,000 foot view, I think it's endemic of a bigger problem, of a broader problem that we have going on in business, in particular in the U.S. And that problem is the allowance of monopolistic behavior from tech companies, right? So currently, I believe the FTC, headed by Lena Khan, I believe they currently have lawsuits ongoing with Google and Meta. And they also, I think, Apple settled a lawsuit with the FTC, a class action suit, where they admitted that Siri had been listening into people's conversations and recording them and sharing that data with Apple. So this is kind of where you end up when you have essentially like three companies that control a large amount of the data, of the interactions, and of user data gathered by those platforms for American citizens. You end up in a situation where companies and organizations can do things that are not to the benefit of their users or their customers and get away with it because there are no real repercussions, right? So they can because I'd be willing to bet, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'd be willing to bet that there's some money, some funding, some lobbying, etc., from Meta and Google that helped get the TikTok ban passed, right? Essentially getting the government to eliminate competition for them. You end up in a situation where Facebook, Google, Apple, and companies like them have the ability to essentially do whatever they want. Amazon is another one. I think there's a upcoming lawsuit with the FTC against Amazon as well. Have the ability to essentially disadvantage and in some cases outright abuse their users or their customers with no real world repercussions. And according to Lena Khan, and I happen to agree with her, that is the definition of a monopoly. When a business is so big and controls so much of the market that they can negatively impact their customers and not suffer any consequences for it, that's a monopoly. And those should not exist in our capitalist system, right? They are actually anti-capitalist. And it's something that we have to, Ticketmaster, yep, Dave just threw in the comments, Ticketmaster is another good example, right? It's just, I think it's a good indication that we are on the wrong path, from a business perspective, and that we need to course correct. Am I hopeful that's going to happen in the near future? I don't know, but it's coming. It's coming, right? These things are not, these monopolies cannot continue unfettered indefinitely. There is a day coming where they will be broken up. So, we're back where we were 100 years ago when they were breaking up, the sort of robber baron class and filing antitrust lawsuits against the railroads. Right, we're right back there. It's just now instead of trains, it's data on social media, but the behavior is essentially the same. So anyway, that's what I think. I wish everybody the best of luck. If the TikTok ban does go into effect and it negatively impacts you, I hope you do okay, and I hope you start trying to, if you haven't already, move some of your eggs into another basket. Don't rely on a platform that is controlled by someone else, because who knows? One day they may just turn around and decide to throw the basket away, and then you've got no recourse. So that's all I got, Dom. That's all I got for today on the TikTok ban. And Not the Smartest Guys in the Room. We appreciate you guys. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate you being a part of the community. We love you. We thank you. And we will see you here next Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. for another episode of Not the Smartest Guys in the Room. Until then, have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. We love you. Thanks. Bye-bye now.